meeting of June 16. Welcome everyone here. And we'll open the meeting at 7 o'clock p.m. And ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Steers.
Here.
Denman.
Here.
Piper.
Here.
M. Mathers.
Here.
G. Mathers.
Here.
Lawrence.
Here.
King.
Here. Okay, all trustees are present. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance to our wonderful flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda, approval of agenda. Any changes, modifications?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Lawrence, so seconded by Denman to approve the agenda as presented. Any conversation? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes, opposed say no. Motion carries. Next up are the minutes from our regular meeting of 6/2/2025.
Make a motion, we accept the regular meeting minutes of 6/2/2025 as presented.
A second.
Motion by trustee Lawrence, supported by trustee M. Mathers to approve the regular meeting of 6/2/25 as presented. Discussion, comments, changes? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have on pages 5 through 13, payment of bills. The grand total of our bills tonight are $431,023.49. $431,023.49.
On page 10, the life care ambulance bill, is that the new contract?
I don't know.
No work. The life care ambulance, is that the new contract?
That, I'm assuming not, but I haven't looked. I didn't look at the number, I mean, you might know.
If I remember correctly, it is, and it's per quarter.
This is for the fourth
This
quarter,
would make sense.
so I would guess maybe not if it's for the fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter?
Because I know it's increasing slightly.
Fourth quarter would probably be last year's, I'm guessing, or the
That's-
calendar year.
Right.
So Jody, do you know if we're getting any reimbursements for time not
There was $1,017 on this one for that.
2017, so we're
Yeah.
not getting that.
I've had time to scan it and email it to everybody, sorry.
Okay. How much was it?
8275.
Our representative Mary down here's got the total for the next year's 38,876. Divide that by 4, it's 97,19. He has the total for next year's 38,870.
So it's kind of
divide by
close, I
4
guess.
For the 4 quarters is 97,19.
That's about $1,500 off-ish.
So this is probably the last payment of the first one, or last year's payment.
That's for the next year's, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
That contract already been finalized,
Yeah. It's the same as what it was previously.
just higher rate,
Yeah.
higher rate and less responsibility.
So they're actually working on having 2 ambulances on call. So I think they had some issues with staffing, is kind of how they described the last contract.
I thought they had that issue.
It's the ever evolving COVID thing that they're still struggling with. cause we even asked and brought up about, you know, non-emergent, response times, and they're working on it,
Yeah.
but, yeah, that's the number that they provided us.
I only have one on page 11, the Roberts excavating for a sewer. And that's contracted services, is that for that latest sewer break?
That would be the sewer break, not Robert Brothers, that was,
That was a water line.
A broken water line?
289.
No, one more.
4740.
4,740.
Dug up and repaired a water line, doesn't say what street it was on, Mark, do you remember?
This one.
I saw them.
Well,
I saw them digging it up. I can't remember where it was.
Can't remember either.
I saw them digging it up.
Yeah.
You did too, didn't you?
Is it right across from my house, or on Third Street?
No, well, that was a sewer line.
No.
He had to pay for that.
you're talking about Florence Road, right? Or does it say that?
The bill doesn't say what road it was
I'm
on.
thinking that was Florence Road, there was a leaking line at Florence and Robinson.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I have one question. Page 13, the park week cleanup to the village DDA is,
Yes, that's actually an $8,100 charge from, I don't remember who the company is, but the DDA is hurting this year. They did not get the sort of revenue
You're talking,
reimbursement that they'd expect.
you said the park weed cleanup?
Yes.
on page 13, yeah,
Yeah.
this says.
It was divided amongst the rec board, us and the DDA. We were all gonna pay 2,700. It was for Justin Hall's dad to
There you go.
weed everything in town, like the parks and everything, and spray.
Okay,
It was like,
so that's separate from what the, Marcus is doing? With
Yeah.
the
yeah,
DPW?
yeah, we contracted this guy, and he's gonna handle all the weeding, and trimming around the parks and stuff.
Okay.
That was, the rec board paid part of that too. That's also, I think that's also to clean it up in the spring,
Yeah.
and then, weed and everything all year.
Okay.
For all the parks.
Possible that at the end there will be a small additional charge,
Right.
but right now it's $8,100.
Yes, divided 3 ways.
Yes.
Send your kid.
You know, just in generalities here, the police and man and brake ops, $800 total in the bills. The police and man and brake, for the sewer, 75, 970. Life care was 8275, Ruth Riley, 289,000. Robert Excavating had 4740. All other bills were 52,147. So, in total, 431,023.49.
I will make a motion that we pay the bills in the amount of $431,023.49.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Pro Tem Piper, supported by Trustee Spears, to pay the bills in the amount of $431,023.49. Any final questions? Call roll, please.
G. Mathers,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
King,
Yes,
Steers,
Yes.
Denman,
Yes.
Piper,
Yes.
and Mathers.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Now time for public comment. I do want to read a few things here. So on page 2, generalities, all persons who wish to speak during public comment will be given the opportunity. No person will be allowed to speak more than once and for a maximum length of 3 minutes. Persons must be recognized by the chair and from the podium if physically able. Comments must be directed to the chairperson. Please refrain from side conversations that may disrupt or distract from any presentations or village business during the meeting. It's very disruptive for us. A person who's disrupting the meeting will be asked to cease the behavior or leave, and public comment is designed for comments only, not questions, over which your person may grant an exception on a case-by-case basis. So that said, anyone has a public comment and are able to go to the podium, please go there. Otherwise, you are welcome to stand up and address council. Okay, seeing no one, we'll go on visitor presentations. Mark, any visitor presentations?
No, sir.
Okay, items on the consent agenda, starting on page 14.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agendas as they are presented.
I will second that.
Okay, motion by trustee Lawrence, supported by trustee Piper to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I know that the chief wanted to talk with the council.
Oh, okay. Chief, you have the floor.
Appreciate it. Just a couple things. The pictures that I left for each of you are of the new car we finally have back now with actual lights and sirens on it. And then some exciting news there. If you look at the other picture on top is the window panels. We had that made for it because it does not have a prisoner cage. So I thought that looked pretty sharp with the Falcon on it. And then also today, some other exciting news is we have a crime scene tech class being taught by our own property manager, Dave Ives. We have students as far as Holland that started that class today. It's a 4-day class, so we are cutting edge.
David has proven to be invaluable for the police department, property management, and his training too, so.
Were we able to get everybody in then?
To the class?
Yeah.
Well, we have 5 students and he can only handle 6.
Okay.
So, but with a little more advance notice next time, we kind of struggled to set dates, and it was pretty well the last minute thing, so we're shocked we even got 5 students, but I think next time it's gonna be packed every time.
Yep.
So,
Awesome.
While he's talking, we met with Centerville, and I think we got pretty close to agreeing on a contract. It'll have to be reviewed by the lawyer, of course, but we made a few changes that he and I thought were a good idea. I gave a copy to Dick and a copy to Eric to read, explaining what it was. And I think we're pretty close, if everybody's okay with what we agreed to. I think we're pretty close down the contract.
Good. All right, thank you, Chief. Anybody else on items from the consent agenda? Okay, if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Oh, I already got one. Never mind. Richard Lawrence and supported by Kathy Piper. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, unfinished business, fire station update and building authority resolution.
You know that Roger Sweats, our attorney, is here to discuss the resolution for the building authority. So I don't know what order you want to take. If you want the council to ask questions, or if you just want to make a statement to begin.
I can say a few things and then happy to take questions. So, so a couple of you are new faces to me. Many of you aren't, and for those of you that have been here, you remember this project's kind of been going for a while. So, you know, it's over a year ago that the decision was made to go down the route of establishing a building authority to issue the bonds, to come up with the money the village needs to borrow to match the grant that you received for the fire station. The reason for the building authority is that building authority bonds fall under the village's higher 10% general debt limit, as opposed to capital improvement bonds, which the village could issue directly but have a 5% limit. And the village's financial advisor had advised you that it would not be prudent to use up all of your, we may even be a little bit over, depending on where those numbers are now. The financial advisor looked at that, maybe as much as 2 years ago, and just said it would be prudent for the village to use the building authority to preserve its general borrowing power with those capital improvement bonds. So that's what brought us here today. This process is all kind of moving slowly, so we're the village is working through the gears of the rural development program, and those programs, never move super quickly. But this is kind of now that the building authority is established, this is the first step needed to actually open the door to the ability to issue bonds. This isn't a commitment to do it, but the statute requires that the initial phase that you do is to adopt this resolution and then publish a notice to the electors of the village of your intent to issue bonds. And that then starts a 45-day referendum period where people could ask for an election on the bond issue, and if sufficient petitions are not received in 45 days, then the village, together with the building authority, is free to move ahead and pursue that bond issue, assuming everything else comes together. But we're still early, given all the bureaucratic red tape that has to go through. But because there's this 45-day period, and then there's an additional 15-day waiting period after the 45 days goes, it's prudent to get this done so that this contingency is at least off the list. And so that's what you have in front of you tonight. There's a lot of paperwork here because there's a form of what the building authority lease would look like. While the building will be owned by the building authority and bonds issued by the building authority, this lease basically gives all the rights to use and control the building back to the village. So we've got the form of that, but that's going to be reworked probably significantly, as rural development continues to go through this, designs are completed, and eventually bids taken for the building. So the bottom line tonight is the last couple pages of the packet, which have the form of that notice, are really the key things being accomplished tonight, which is to publish that notice to the public of the intent to enter into this building authority lease, assuming everything comes together for the project. And it would allow borrowing up to $2.5 million. That's more than what's expected. We do want to build, because there's so much process with this, and we have to back up and redo all this process if bids came in high. We do normally recommend that you use a little bit higher number. You're not obligated to that number. That's a ceiling, and then it'll come down from that once bids are received. And rural development won't let you borrow any more money than what's actually going to be needed for the building at the time. If there are concerns about that number, we can talk about it, but Mark and I kind of talked, and he felt that's kind of like the highest it could possibly go and still be feasible. But I just want you to know you're not committed to that tonight. This is just leaving your options open so that you can proceed once bids are received if they come in a little bit high. If you want something different, we can change it. But that's kind of the gist of what you had in front of you, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
I've read this thing through a couple different times, and I can honestly say I don't understand.
Not supposed to. That's the thing. That's why they write it that way, so you gotta hire them to do it.
If you, to kind of put it in really simple terms, I understand it's a long document and it's a little bit complicated, but basically the gist of that lease is that in exchange for being responsible to pay all the principal and interest on the bonds, which that will be a general obligation of the village, so you're committed to paying the principal and interest on the bonds. You give that to the building authority, and then they give it to the bondholder. In exchange for that, the village basically has full control over the building to use for your fire purposes as you, the village council, deem appropriate. And then you also would have to pay all of the operating costs of the building. And I'm not involved in whatever broader arrangements you have for your fire department, but basically, you're gonna use those resources to pay this. If for some reason they run short, you are pledging your general fund as a backup security to make sure that the bonds get paid. And basically, in exchange for paying the bond, you get full control of the improved building.
So on page 20, the bottom one says, the application of the village and the lease contract shall be the limited tax. What is limited tax?
As I'm sure you're probably aware, the village has a limit of the number of mills that you can levy, and that's then rolled back every year by the Headley calculation. What's that saying is that you're pledging to the payment of these bonds all the money that you're allowed to levy for taxes, but nothing over and above what your legal limit is. So this would not allow you, I assume you're probably at your Headley limit, Mark, or is there a little bit of room there yet? So.
I'm sorry to repeat that, probably at what?
Is the village at its Headley limit for the amount of millage it can levy?
Yes, that's correct, but
Yeah.
obviously, I haven't set that assessment anywhere near that, but, it's right, currently it's 2 mills for the fire department, 1.5 mills for the police. Dan, do you happen to remember?
I think it's 1 right now.
It could be 1. I'm prepared to bump the fire assessment to fire millage to 2.5 next year, and that would cover the full cost of the building, of the construction of the building.
Are you gonna take away from something else to make that up? If you're at 2 now and go to 2.5, are you gonna lower one of the other ones, or are you gonna add 2 again?
Likely it would be, well, first of all, there has not been any assessed against the ambulance yet.
Okay.
There haven't been any mills assessed against the ambulance. So I would prefer to keep the police department at 3, or at 1. I might consider dropping it to 3/4.
Okay.
But
So the limited just means you can't raise taxes above your head.
I was thinking that it was 2 and 1.5 for the police.
no, 2 and 1 right now.
It is right now?
2 for the fire, 1 for the
Because
police.
I thought it was 1.5 for the police, and you were gonna lower it to 1 and make the fire 2.5.
That's,
We talked, I thought we
I wouldn't lower that 1 mil to 1/2 mil. I'd probably leave it at 3/4 of a mil.
Mark,
It's,
for the taxes that are going out this July, the fire department is 2, and the police department is 1.5.
Oh, okay.
And our Headley limit, I think, is 12, but we're only assessing 11 3/4.
Okay, yeah. As you might guess, I haven't looked at that recently, but I was thinking it was 1, but if you say it's 1.5 right now, I'll believe that, so.
One key distinction to keep in mind, and I don't work with the village in this aspect of what you do, but it's my understanding you fund the fire protection services through a special assessment. That's something separate from an additional to your tax.
Right, yeah.
I think.
And you set that rate every year as part of your budget process.
So the 2.5 counts the grant money, or that's just our part? Cause I thought, wasn't it 3.5?
Well,
This is just what the village would be limited to borrowing as a match to the grant.
As a match to
Yeah.
the grant was, I was thinking 1.5, but I think it's maybe 1.55.
Cause I thought last meeting, the number was 3.5, wasn't it?
that was for the total budget.
Oh, that's,
Total.
yeah, but we got a grant for 1.5,
Yeah.
so now we
Oh.
need 2 points.
Okay.
So they can go.
How much is, okay, so how much is the grant?
The grant was 1.5 million, the grant through Congressman.
Right, so, and we're gonna borrow 2.5.
That's the cap on what you could.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
As-
what-
Okay.
As I said, we're not expecting it to go all the way up to 2.5, but that just gives you some leeway to decide what to do with bids from
And
that.
the other part of that is, and Roger said it, but if we only apply for a loan of 1 million, we can't go higher.
Right, I know, I
If we apply
understand,
for,
I understand what you mean.
we apply for 2.5.
That's, I just, it was 3, and then I seen 4, so I was confused, so.
And you're just in a situation yet now where you haven't received bids, and, you know, you just never know how things are gonna turn out when you get bids, and when you do, that decision is still fully to be made. If bids came in at 5 million, for instance, you know, you're not gonna borrow it, you probably just would say, no, we're not gonna do the project, and that's all your decision yet to make in the future.
The unfortunate thing is, if we decide not to build, we don't get the grant money either, so it really puts us in a pickle.
So, explain these bonds, how they work.
Well, so this is, the whole concept of a building authority is kind of an odd, very old concept in Michigan that you don't have everywhere. But historically, a village could not borrow any money directly to build buildings. And so the state said, what you have to do if you want to build a building is you have to have a building authority. And so that's a component unit of the village. It's an authority you set up and you appoint the board members to, and then it owns the building, it borrows the money, and then it leases the building to the village in exchange for paying the debt service. And then once the bonds are paid off, the title to the building just comes back to the village. It's all just kind of form over substance. It's extra paperwork. It's kind of unfortunate that we have to go through all that, but that's just the way you can do this and still preserve, you know, some of your simpler borrowing capacity.
It's more red tape, basically.
Yeah, because the building authority is not actually going to do anything other than have several meetings to approve the bonds, close on the bonds, and then because all of the use of the building is leased back to the village, it just will kind of go dormant at that point, and we'll go forward. You know, sometime, you know, 15 years from now, people will even forget you have a building authority, and that's just the way it works. These bonds will be hopefully sold to rural development, which is a program of the federal government, which gives you, generally speaking, a slightly lower interest rate than in the bond market, but it also gives you a lot longer time to pay the bonds back, so that it makes the annual payments affordable to the village.
Oh, really didn't answer my question.
Okay.
So if the building authority applies for all these bonds, which is basically loans from companies, or?
Well, so in its simplest form, this will be a loan that the village will get from the USDA Rural Development Program through the intermediary process of the building authority.
Right. So the bonds itself, who pays those bonds back?
Because of the lease, the village will.
Through that payment from the special assessment?
Well, you will pay it from whatever your available funds are.
Our
The plan
funds
is
that
to
we
use the
plan on
special.
using our special
Yeah.
assessments to pay for this, and that's the money we'll use. So, I guess I'm confused, are we
Not
paying?
just special assessment, it's right?
So the plan is to use your special assessment revenue, but because, you know, the government's not just gonna accept a very narrow pledge, you're basically putting all the available resources of the village behind this. And so that's why it's important that you carefully plan to make sure that your assessment revenues are projected to be sufficient to pay the bonds, because that's what you're planning to do.
So do the bonds go through the rural development loan?
Rural development is the lender that makes the loan.
Right.
So a bond is just another word for something like, you know, like with your house, you have a note that's secured by a mortgage. A bond is just a different name for a debt instrument, so it's kind of like a note. So the building authority will sign the bond, and it will owe the money to rural development, and then the village will pay the building authority, and the building authority will pay.
It's just a description of a different kind of loan, basically, a bond. Is a
Well, I
loan.
just wanna make, I
Well, it
didn't
has
know.
different terms and stuff too, towards it, right?
You know, the terms of the loan will be set when there's a whole application process with rural development, And when they get through that process and they have everything they've asked for from the village, they'll give you what's called a letter of conditions. And that's kind of like a loan agreement you might have with the bank for your home loan. That will have all the terms, and then you'll know what the interest rate is, and you'll know what the maximum that they're gonna commit to lending the village is. But yeah, the concept of a bond itself, it's just like it does the same thing as like a promissory note. But for municipalities in Michigan, by law, you call it a bond as opposed to a note. So it's kind of, you could do this and go to a bank and just have a bank loan and then use this bond to document it. But the terms you're gonna get from a bank are not gonna be as favorable, so that's why, the staff is looking to go to rural development, because you get a longer payback time.
Yeah, they're not gonna give you 40 years to pay it back.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't pay the bonds and rural development and have to have separate payments and make sure that we
Yeah,
had
no.
funds for that. So.
Yeah, no, the loan will be made by rural development, and the bond will require that you pay the loan back to rural development.
So what is the expiration date on this?
That will come with this letter of conditions, from rural development, and do you know, Mark, I assume the village asked for 40 years in its application to rural development. They will approve something between 30 and 40 years for payback. And then you'll have roughly even annual payments to rural development, depending on what the interest rate is. They will give you the interest rate when they obligate the loan with that letter of conditions, and then the village will ultimately receive the lower of whatever the rate is in that letter, or if the rate goes down by the time you close, you get the lower. And then the repayment schedule will then be crafted so that it's roughly even, equal annual payments, so that you've got kind of a smooth path through your budget.
The rate right now is 4.25.
Is it?
And it changes every quarter. But it doesn't move like the market. Rural development is the one who sets the rates. There is no penalty for early payment, there's no penalty for early payoff. In fact, they say we'd appreciate it if you paid more than you need to for a while. But I think if it's 4.25%, I did some ciphering, as they say, using a loan calculator. The total would come to about $103,000. This is off the top of my head, but I know I'm pretty close. And the mills, 2.5 mills would just about match that exactly. It'd be nice if it came in a little bit lower, because that would make a significant difference on the payments, but I'm comfortable that for a 40-year loan at 4.25%, we can handle it through the special assessment millage.
Okay, and so there's no, if we don't get this done, we lose the grant timeline?
If the loan doesn't happen, we can't build a fire station for $1.5 million, so we don't have the money, we just would not get that grant money, so.
I think Marky's asking if there's a deadline for the grant. Do you have to do this by a certain date?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what that deadline is, but, yeah, it's a finite, term, but I don't think we're in any danger at this point of losing that grant. It's only if the loan doesn't happen that the grant money will go away.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, Roger? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of information. Okay, so before us then is, fire station update and building authority resolution. The resolution starts on page 20. 2021. Resolution number 2503 was given to us by Mark tonight. We're asked to look at it and see if we can adopt that. Kathy?
I have another question on the building authority. I'm assuming that they have not met yet, to discuss whatever they're supposed to be doing with this? I mean, the building authority is the one that has to apply for the bond, correct?
The building authority will ultimately issue the bonds. I don't believe they've met yet. There's not really much for them to do because, you know, the building authority is really meant to be an alter ego of the village council and what the village council wants to do. So it's not like they're gonna go and design the building, you know, on their own and then come back to you and say, this is what we wanna do. You're really gonna kinda hand them, you know, once rural development obligates the loan, you know, I think you still have to do design work. And, you know, you're gonna tell the architects what you want. And then basically, once that's all done, you'll say to the building authority, here's the deal, you know, would you please proceed?
They're basically the purchaser. We're like a store, and they're gonna purchase something from a bank to give us the money, they're in between.
Yeah.
We still make all the decisions, they just are the intermediary to get the fund
Yes.
started.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
I understand.
Anyone else? Comments?
So if we don't have enough in our general, or in our assessment, say, to cover it, I know we have to take it out of our general fund, correct? To
Well,
pay
yeah,
for
it'd come out of the fire department budget if that were the case. I don't feature that happening, but as the saying goes, anything is possible. Like I say, at 2.5 mils, that would be a little over $100,000 a year, and the payment would be a little over $100,000. So that's more or less a wash. The only thing that would change that is if the rates went up. The length of the loan won't change. So the rates, if they went up, for example, to 4.5, I think it's still doable. Anything too much more than that, I'm talking at $2.5 million. I think it's still doable.
So what happens if we need another fire truck or something? I'm sure there's gonna be equipment needed within 40 years. I mean,
You're hoping population goes up.
We certainly won't have the mad money to buy a new fire truck. The nice thing is that we still share that expense with the two townships. But, yeah, we have to watch our pennies in terms of
and the
new
townships
equipment.
won't pay any of this?
I'm sorry?
Townships will not pay any of the building,
No, the building is
just for the village?
So,
Do they pay rent? Don't they pay rent now?
they do, and I can't tell you the total amount. Do you happen to remember, Jody?
I don't.
I don't wanna put my foot in my mouth. It's been there too often. They do pay a significant amount of rent. We bumped it up a couple years ago. Mike bumped it up. Last year, for example, from the two townships, and I'm talking about rent and personnel costs and so forth, they were over $80,000 that we got from the two townships. And that money, also, if the revenue exceeds expenses, then that extra money can go toward a vehicle fund, something
So
like that.
that money goes into the fire department fund? It
Correct.
doesn't go into the general fund, it goes into the fire department?
Well, I mean, in effect, it goes into the general fund, but the money can be moved to the fire department, so.
Is it a set interest rate once the loan starts?
Right, you will get a fixed interest rate, and what I was gonna say, just one thing that's nice about rural development is you will have a guaranteed interest rate before you have to spend money to do the design work on the building. Here in the marketplace, you'd have to pay for the design before you know the interest rate, and then you could be in the situation of having spent a lot of money and find out rates go up and you can't afford it. Here we'll know as soon as they obligate it, that they're guaranteeing the rate won't be any higher than that. It will be fixed over the life.
If the Fed drops the interest, that interest rate could drop too, correct?
Well, you got me, because rural
Well,
development.
Yeah, so rural development sets its interest rate on the first day of each quarter of the federal schedule. So, you know, July 1, October 1, January 1, April 1. And they do that based at, and I don't understand all the ins and outs of how they do it, but they have some market schedule that they look at, and they take what the interest rate is on those market tables on the last 4 Fridays of the quarter, average that, and then that's their interest rate going forward for the next quarter. So if Mark says it's 4 1/4 right now, and if you got the loan obligated before July, you're not going to, but say you did, that 4 1/4 would be guaranteed. If then on July 1st, that went down to 4, and you were able to close, before the end of that quarter, you would actually get, it's not like the bank where, you get the higher, you actually get the lower of here. So once they obligate it, you're guaranteed what that rate's gonna be, and then you can know and you can decide, if we have a problem and rates skyrocket to 5.5% at the time they obligate, you can just decide not to do the project at that point in time. But if it's 4 1/4 and you feel you can do that, now you know you've got the comfort to go ahead and spend money on design, knowing that it's at least within, that part of it's within your budget. You still don't know, when you get construction bids, that's the other wild card you've got, and there's no way to guarantee that.
So once the loan's closed, it's at 4 1/4 per se.
Yep.
Say like it went down to 4 in 6 months after the loan's closed, you're still at 4 1/4.
You're still at 4 1/4, yeah, it's not variable, it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. If rates in general went down, you would be able to refinance it at a lower rate. But realistically, nobody's gonna give you refinancing until you kind of get into that last 20-year period.
So it's in our best interest to get everything done as soon as possible, or?
Well, I think it makes sense to get this done as soon as possible. It's gonna cost you a little bit of money, because you're gonna have a 1/4-page publication in the paper. But this doesn't obligate you anything beyond the cost of that advertisement. And then we're at least past this 45-day referendum period. And then I think, then you're kind of on hold until you hear what rural development's gonna do. That'll be the next big step. They'll come back and they'll say, we'll give you 30 years at 4 1/4, we'll give you 40 years at 4 1/4. You can see what those terms are. And if those terms still work with your budget, then you can decide, we wanna tell the architects, go ahead and do the design. And that's gonna require then a much more commitment of spending money. I don't know what the arrangement is for what that's gonna cost, but that'll be more significant. And then if the bids come back within your budget, based on that, after you've got that design, it'll go out and be competitively bid, presumably, unless you do a design build. And then once you have bids in hand, then you'll know exactly what it's gonna be.
There's a possibility they could go down, the rate could go down too.
Well, I was gonna ask, because you brought up a good point, why do we wait on doing the environmental part of this?
A lot of that was done last year.
Well, some of it.
There was like
Yeah,
60
some of the stuff
or,
was done.
I don't remember the figure exactly in that police part for the environmental that needed to be done. I think it was $60,000 or $80,000, wasn't it? Yeah.
Maybe, we didn't pay it, we got money from.
I know
So-
you had said we had the money to do it, and I think she had brought up, well, why don't we just do it?
This time last year, we did something, they did something.
Well, the tanks were pulled,
Yeah,
but
They
we
did
didn't
some
pay
kind
for
of-
that, that was,
Right, but
that
I'm
was a
saying-
grant through.
they did some kind of, what was it called?
I know where
Study where they got dirt and soil
Yeah,
samples
they-
last year.
No, they tell me there's some soil sampling to be done yet, and then we have to do the asbestos assessment.
So if
So
we take,
rural development has a lot, they have some extra bureaucratic stuff, so like the environmental review is part of that. There'll be a historic preservation review. There'll also need to be a legal opinion obtained on the title to the property. And you certainly can do those things before you get your letter of conditions from them, but my guess is they're holding up on some of that because you don't want to spend that money if for some reason rural development.
that
comes
was what I
back
was
and
gonna ask, will
says
we have to
we're gonna-
redo that?
You probably, we don't handle that part of it for you, but there probably does need to be done within a certain timeline of the application. So, your architects could help you more with those questions.
We got about $62,000 toward demolition of the building, that's the ARPA relief money. that we got a couple of years ago. That won't pay the total cost of the demolition. So there'll be some extra cost over and above that, and again, the cost for the rest of the environmental.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd like to get it done now, but until all this is resolved, I don't wanna spend that $62,000, so.
Fair enough.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, anyone like to make a motion? Okay, if none, I would like to make a motion that we adopt resolution number 25.03, resolution approving the building authority lease and notice. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by trustee Mathers, supported by trustee Denman to adopt resolution 23-03, resolution approving building authority lease and notice. Further discussion or comments? Okay, call roll please.
Lawrence,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Steers,
Yes.
Denman,
Yes.
Piper,
Yes.
M. Mathers,
Yes.
G. Mathers.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries.
I'm sorry, did Kathy say yes or no?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, unanimous. Okay, next item B under unfinished business, wastewater water treatment plan update, starting on page 37. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Lou.
A lot of information.
Thank you for explaining it to us like we were done. When it comes to that stuff, I
Rolling
know.
on, rolling on stuff.
I've been doing it for 37 years, so sometimes it's a little hard to remember that not everybody sees this stuff every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
you give me a call then to let me, to talk about the notice in the paper.
Okay, the next item is Assembly County Edge invoice.
No.
Okay, I missed the one here. I'm sorry, I jumped on page 37.
You're just getting impatient.
Yes. Yes.
You see a memo that I sent you about Joe Benjamin and the progress update, and he responded in spades, gave you an email that explained the progress so far. You should have that on your desk. And a batch of what I thought were very, very good photographs that show what had happened, or what it was, and what it is today. And what I think is a very, very optimistic or a very positive timeline. It looks like they're actually gonna start operations in July. It won't be running normally. Essentially, they have to turn it on, they have to add bacteria to the effluent to make sure that the treatment facility will handle that bacteria, will handle the effluent. After that, there are a couple more steps in the item I gave you from Mr. Benjamin. But realistically, it looks like we could be done with the plant, that it will be substantially complete, maybe even by the end of August. So I find that part exciting, and we're still planning to arrange a tour for the council sometime in July. I'll wait till Joe lets me know, but the big step, obviously, that we talked about before, was the motor control center, and once that happened, then everything else seems to be falling in place like dominoes. But I thought the photographs complimented his timeline very well, so.
It'll take time to tune all that stuff in too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta fine tune all that. It's not fun.
That goes hand in hand with the break that we had last week on on Gleason Road. The break happened, I'm sure you remember that we laid over 1,000 feet of the plastic pipe. The break happened about probably 300 feet west of where the bypass was installed, so heartbreaking when it happened. They got it repaired pretty quickly, and I hope, I shouldn't say this out loud, hope that that's the last break before we are able to abandon the Three Rivers.
Knock on wood. It works. It works.
Yeah, I had one person who was very angry, and heretofore he'd been really, really patient, but he had sore running in his yard. I certainly understood his disappointment and even anger, but we talked about it and he calmed a little bit. Up until then, he'd been almost the easiest person to deal with on Gleason Road. So, but we managed to, the delay we had, we got the report of the break at about 5:39 a.m. We contacted Morris Excavating and who am I talking about?
Taplin.
Taplin's job, of course, was to go fill their trucks and take them to Three Rivers to dispose of the sewer. Morris couldn't get started until Taplin was on scene and turned off the pump. So there was a long delay. It was probably nearly 1 o'clock by the time Taplin got there and turned off the pump. So the sewer ran for a long time. It was a relatively small flow. Most of the time when you saw the pictures of the pipeline, Swiss cheese would be a nice understatement. But this one, there were just 2 or 3 breaks in the 2 or 3 holes in the line. They replaced about 24 feet of it and turned it back on. So like I said, it ran a lot longer than anyone wanted it to, but we were dead in the water until Taplin could get there to transport the sewer by tanker truck. So that was a bad news day, but the progress of the treatment plant was a good news day. So on balance, I guess it was a positive. Now, along with that, I've got Joe Benjamin put together a I guess the best way to put it, job description that we can post in the newspaper, and I asked Joe if there's any trade magazines or trade newspapers that we would be wise to put something in. Haven't heard back from him yet. I gave you a list of the qualifications and desired traits. If you please take a look at them and get back with me as soon as you can. And by that I mean tomorrow if possible, to let me know if there's anything that we've forgotten or anything that should not be in there. But Joe is the one that put it together, and obviously he knows a lot about treatment plant operators and so forth. We need an operator, we need a superintendent, and that person's job essentially is to run the plant, to read reports and submit reports. We also have to have one operator, at least one operator, and that person's job will be primarily to do the testing and I'll call it grunt work there. And there might be need for a little bit more, although I'm thinking maybe if we can get a little bit imaginative, that we could maybe foist some of the non-technical work off on DPW. Don't tell Marcus I said that, but because they're plenty busy. But we have right now 3 full-time DPW persons and a part-time, a half-time 4th person. Even if that means bumping that 4th person up to full-time to ease the responsibility of the DPW, that might be where we could find additional help for treatment.
They're reading the meters down there.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yes,
see the reason.
primarily it's Terrell
Yeah.
and Seamus Adams is backing up Terrell for the meter reading.
So is the dollar figure and the requirements for the operator or for the superintendent?
That's for the superintendent. What I think should happen is once the superintendent is hired, then he needs to do the interviews for the supplementary help side. So, and it's, originally I had him answering to Marcus, but that doesn't make sense because he'd be making more money than Marcus does. And so now the person would be answering to the manager.
Any news on when distillery will be on their own?
I'm glad you asked that. From Bill Benjamin, they are going, dairy distillery, no, not distillery, MMPA's treatment plant. MMPA must be off our system by July 16th. MMPA told me they will be off the system by July 1st. So there should not be any issue with them not having any place to send their effluent. They can't send it to ours, ours is not equipped to handle their strength.
Shouldn't that also help with, if they're off our system, that should take a lot of pressure off our line down the three.
I was thinking the very same thing. Yeah, they, obviously MMPA sends almost as much sewer to Three Rivers as we do. So you're right, there'll be less pressure.
So it might not be the time for this, but how do they calculate their bathroom and hand washing?
That's on a different system, different sewer system, that comes to us.
I know, how do they meter that to their building?
I can only tell you it is metered, I don't know where the meter is.
Is it based on their water use in the bathroom?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, I think their water is metered for that section, like their bathrooms and their showers and stuff, and that's what it's based on.
That's what we call it.
Because at the mill, in White Pigeon,
It
it was
was
the
the
same.
closest line you could find.
In the mill, we had a water meter for that, and we had a different, like the water that came from the river, it was on a completely different system.
Yeah.
For the boiler and all that stuff, so.
Okay.
Good update. Any other questions?
So MMPA is being billed their share of what there should be.
Until June 30th, they're at their current rate. If they're on our system after July 1st, they will be paying the same rate as everybody else.
Oh, go ahead, I got something I want to say at the end. No.
Any other questions or comments on the wastewater treatment? Moving on to new business. Investment invoice, page 38, Mark.
You'll recall, I assume you'll recall that when we paid Edge, I think it was $1,600 last year for the work they do with Southwest. They're a division of Southwest Michigan First. They sent an invoice this year and asked for $2,000. This is just the village's contribution to the efforts of the Economic Development Authority and the Southwest Michigan First. So I'm asking you to approve that invoice.
Do they send you any kind of report of their activities for the year?
They did last year. I'll ask them.
I'd like to.
I don't mind. I will ask them for it.
Other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll have a meeting prior to that due date of July 9 then, to get a report. Kathy just asked for. So what did you ask for, Kathy?
The report of what they've done for the year. Their activity, I guess.
Okay. And I say the due date for this is on July 9th. I don't know, are you asking to see that before we vote, or?
Oh, yes, for today.
Okay, I thought you were, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanna see it.
Okay.
I mean, sure, okay, then.
I'll send them an email tomorrow asking for it.
All right, so they are requesting, a little bit of an increase to give them $2,000 this year for 2024. Okay. Is there a motion to support EDGE, Taylor County Economic Development, and increase our support to $2,000 for the coming year?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Second. Okay. Motion was by trustee Lawrence, supported by trustee Denman. Help our pledge to $2,000. Any discussion? Okay, call roll, please.
Piper,
Yes.
M. Mathers,
Yes.
G. Mathers,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Steers,
No.
Denman,
Yes.
Okay. Motion carried 6-1. Motion passed. And that being the last item on our,
Oh, one more thing real quick, it's not on the agenda, but Mark, I appreciate your updates because I took a picture of the broken sidewalk, it was good to show it to you. But I got an email that you already know about it, so somebody made a wide turn and broke the brand new sidewalk over there by the corner. And there's a pipe cap sticking out, somebody moved it because it was flipped upside down. I was gonna give you pictures, but you sent the update to me, and so I didn't. So thank you for that.
They're doing a pretty good job of keeping me apprised with updates, so,
And Eric's been putting them on Facebook,
yes.
so everybody can see them.
thank you everyone, thank you for the audience. And we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:03 PM.